Hey, good afternoon. We're a couple minutes late. My apologies. This is the Historical Commission. If there's been a change of rooms, if you're not here for that meeting, then we'll help you find it where you want to be. It is March 11th, 2019, and first order of business to let you know that the meeting is videotaped and will be available for public display. Next item is to review any agenda, review any minutes that have been sent out. I don't believe any were this minute at this for this meeting, and so we will perhaps move forward from that. Unless, am I mistaken on that?
I sent one for January 20th, but I neglected to send it.
Okay, so we'll wait for that. The next item on the agenda is the invitation to public comment. This would be generally for any item not already on the agenda, for anything that anybody wants to bring forward, or to comment on some past agenda item. Okay. The next item for consideration on our agenda is the demolition review application for 43 Penn Street. We're happy to listen to anyone and all who have comment on that. And if you would speak loud enough for everyone in the room and for the via camera to pick up your voice. If you want to move closer than the lectern, you may certainly do so. We normally meet in a much smaller room in a less formal environment, so this is pretty formal for us. At any rate, is there someone who'd like to go first? Great, thank you. Can you just identify yourself and come on up?
Okay. How far do I come up?
Where literally as comfortable as you can.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ellen Bartos from Vernacular Real Estate. I represented the buyers in this transaction. And
Could everybody speak up? We can't hear back here.
Okay, I'm Ellen Bartos from Delep Real Estate, and I represented the buyers and current owners of 43 Finn Street. And at the time they bought, I was unaware, unfortunately, of the demolition delay review statute. And so they applied for their demo permit, and it was determined that the structure was possibly significant. I took some pictures. The addition in the back of the house was built, I believe, in 1976. I pulled up a building permit that shows, I think, as far as I can decipher it, that it was built in 1976.
Thank you.
And do you guys want to
Okay, thank you.
look at this
Take
stuff?
that.
So we're hoping.
Maybe we keep this and add it to the
Yes.
phone. Okay, thank you.
Yes, so that's what I have. They, of course, are planning to build something in keeping with the neighborhood, but very, very nice. And we're hoping that they can take that building down and put up something nice.
Very good. Thank you. Next person like to speak? Yes, whatever order you'd like.
I live on Warfield Place. My name is Liz Gaudet, and my wife isn't here. She's in California right now. And my neighbor, I'm at 4 Warfield, and my neighbor is at 2 Warfield. Her name is Ruth Ozeki. Both of them work from home, and so they're a little concerned about a demolition project.
I can't hear a word anybody's saying.
They're concerned about the demolition aspect because my wife and my neighbor both work at home. So we are just wondering what the extent of this demolition and construction would be, and are there hours planned for it, and what would the new structure look like, and would it change the tenor of our small neighborhood, which is all period houses. My house is 120 or something years old, and We just don't know if a house or a structure built in 2020 would really fit into the neighborhood.
Just before we go forward, let me just, and thank you very much. See, let me explain to those of you who may not know about the intent and role of the demolition delay ordinance that the city has. And that is that the intention is to help give thoughtful pause to any proposal to completely demolish a house that is of a certain age or a certain significance to the city or to its surroundings, either because of, well, it could be for a variety of reasons, who's lived there, who built it, how it looks, the architect, its role within a collection of other houses, so it's not just the one house. It's an intent to help the city engage in thoughtful change. It's not intended to prevent demolition. It doesn't prevent demolition because the longest the demolition delay can last is 12 months. It can last less time, but the longest it can last is 12 months. And the city certainly has seen situations where an owner has intended to demolish, and then has waited 12 months and then gone ahead and completely demolished the structure. So this is different from the local historic district with which you may be familiar and which exists on Elm Street and Round Hill, where all of the structures in that district are very carefully controlled because of their significance and membership in that district. The demolition delay is automatically applied to houses of a certain antiquity. In this case, we're looking at a house built in the early 1880s, that's my understanding, in the original house. And it can be applied actually going forward to houses built even in the 20th century, if there are reasons for that application. So it is intended to cause perhaps for time for discussion and thoughtfulness if someone intends to take down a house, and there could perhaps be alternatives, not the prohibition perhaps, but maybe changes or alterations in the plan or modifications. It's intended to provide a time for dialogue, and it's not intended to be an aggressive, hostile, or preventative effort. It's meant to make the change in Northampton be thoughtful. It's also a policy that is widely followed throughout the state, so we are by far not the only ones. In fact, we were actually one of the later ones to adopt a demolition delay, and I'm certainly proud that the city has done that, and it's been used in numerous times to help provide sort of a thoughtful period to discuss what the future of a building could be. As I said, there's an outer limit of 12 months. There have been times when, through discussion and conversation, the delay has lasted less time because there was at some point no longer a need for any further discussion because there was a thoughtful modifications on the original plans. So it's kind of open-ended. Our role tonight is to look at whether the building itself should be preferably preserved, but we are not that formalistic. We'd be happy to talk about a variety of topics as long as it's clear that we're not talking about future use. It's not our role to pass judgment on future use, and it's also not our judgment to look at interior use in any way. And some of the requirements, strict requirements of the historic district, are certainly not applicable in a situation like this. So that was just some background. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions within my limited ability. And why don't we go to the next speaker? Yes, go ahead. Come on up.
My name is Lois Aarons. I also live on Warfield Place, 5 Warfield Place, which is like one house over. It's a house between 43 Finn and my house, and there's one house in between. I am sympathetic to Liz's comments about changing the tenor of our little street, which is Warfield Place, and increase in cars and traffic. I personally don't know what's planned for that spot once the house is knocked down, assuming it's knocked down. I know this isn't the purview of the commission or your committee, but I also feel like, and I just want to state that I mean, there's so much talk about the need for apartments and affordable apartments in Northampton. So to see a house that has 4 or 5 apartments in it being knocked down to be replaced by, I'm assuming, a single family dwelling, I think of as a loss to our neighborhood and also a loss to the city in terms of affordable downtown rental space. I have a 2-family house, so I'm sympathetic to the need for people to have a place to rent in where they can walk to downtown or walk to a hearing. So those are my concerns about this proposal. Again, perhaps we would have other concerns, those of us that live on Warfield Place, if we knew what it is that's being proposed to be built in its place. And it's my understanding the way we would find out about that would be once a building permit is submitted to the city. And then depending on the zoning and what's being proposed, then there might be another opportunity for us to, people on Warfield Place, to say what we think about the change to, or potential change to, our street and our immediate neighborhood. Thank you.
Right, any questions?
Is that information's public, correct?
Oh, yeah, that's all public information.
It's on the city website, correct? Yeah. So
What's on the website?
the plans for what is being proposed for that site is available on the city website.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Can somebody share that?
Sarah, how would they, did the building commissioners department, the building department?
So I don't know what's been filed with the building department, but what's been provided to the historical commission is available through the planning department website. It's in the, if you go to the main page, it's permits to be logged in. It's a prominent link.
I can't hear what you're saying.
It's on the planning department homepage. There's a
And
direct
what
link
does
to all
it say?
permits under
I
consideration.
don't have a computer with me.
So the city website, northampton.gov, Northampton, Mass. Northampton,
Yeah.
The Office of Planning and Sustainability, that department, there are links to permits to be logged, permit applications to be logged, and that's where you would find it.
Well, I don't know her name, sorry, I don't know
Sarah.
anybody's name, but can you say what that is so that those of us that are here that live on
It's not a friendly link to say out loud, but it's on the planning department homepage. There's a direct link to all the permits that are currently.
I mean, could you just
considered.
explain whether or not it's a multi-family house or a single-family house or what?
What's been provided to the historical commission is a single family house.
to knock down that house to build a single-family house?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Yes, sir.
How are you?
Good. You got documents?
My name is Jason Heilman. I am the builder who represents the client and the owner at 43 Finn. And our goal here is to talk to you guys. It's not in any way to attack the Historical Commission's determination, but to discuss the value of the house that is at 43 Finn versus the value of the intent of the construction of the new home there. And are we allowed to ask some questions? I'm just wondering who's on I know you're on the Historical Commission, but who else?
Oh, this is the historical.
This is the Historical Commission,
Okay,
okay.
including also Sarah LaValle, who is the planning department staffer for the
Yeah.
historical commission.
And were you were all present during the determination that this was a significant structure?
Most of us were. It was a
I believe so, yeah.
quorum vote.
Do you know, I know at one point we had asked to get, or the owner of the property, Jay, has asked to get the meeting minutes of that to understand the criteria of that decision. We have yet to see that.
I actually provided the section that's in the minutes
Okay.
to the person who requested it.
Okay,
And I can put the draft minutes up online, but it's exactly as provided.
okay,
It was a very brief discussion.
okay. And so what we did is we did an exercise of going through and, you know, after the client bought the property and we got involved, I had gone to see Louis Hasbrook and say, hey, this is coming up, what should we expect? And he said to submit the demolition permit first. And then we got the notification that there was this delay to the demolition permit. And so we started looking at all the criteria by which that was determined. And so what we did is we looked at some of what we assume may have been some of the determining factors. And one was the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System report on the house. And when I read that, it tells me that the area on Finn and that whole area on the corner was developed by the same developer during the period of the time that this house was built. And if you look at all of those homes, every foundation is almost identical, and there's really only 3 types of homes in that whole area. So we looked and we thought about, is this significant and different than the houses around it? And the only thing that made it different is listed in this report, which was the 2 trim features in the gable ends and the porch. And then what we did is we did an exercise and we said, well, what could we do to make this house work for the client? And what we came up with was that the house got a lot of problems. Structurally, it's inadequate to today's standards. It has asbestos both inside and outside throughout the home, and it has lead on the trim inside and outside of the home everywhere. We went in, we did tests, we looked at the structure, and the features of the house that make it sort of unique to the neighborhood are the porch, which has been altered multiple times. The lower deck of the porch is completely different. It's all pressure treated.
Can we, just for clarification, are you talking about the front porch on Finn Street or
That's
the side
correct.
porch?
The Finn Street porch.
Okay.
Okay? So and I sent pictures. Did everyone get a chance to review the reports and all the documents that we sent? Everybody looked at those? So you can clearly see that the bottom 30 to 40% of every one of those posts and the porch below it has been completely altered. And since the time of this report, even the balusters and balustrades have been removed completely from the porch. So as this is continuing to decay, more and more of these features are coming off of the house. And so then we looked at the other 2 features that we discussed in this report, which are the gable features. And if you look at those, the front one has been put together with a piece of PVC plastic that got screwed through the face because it's clearly rotted so much over the years that the mortise and tenon has failed. And in order to keep that from falling off, somebody had to go up and apply trim to it. Now the other feature, what is the adjacent street? Warfield. So there's the same architectural feature facing Warfield, and you can see that cracking and starting to fail, and that's essentially going to need to get worked on. And those are the 3 architectural features The problem is if you do any work on those, you're gonna have to take them off, remove all the lead, and when you do a chemical bath on them, you're gonna destroy them. So you're gonna have to eventually just remove or replace these 3 features. And you'll see in the report, there's limited to no insulation throughout the house. The walls don't even meet a depth by which we could meet today's standards of an R22 on the outside wall. And the floor system is completely understructured, where the joists themselves have been cut in such a way that there's only 3 inches of wood that makes connection to the structural beams that spans over 14.5 feet. So basically, we would have to strip this thing down to the frame, take everything off of it, completely abate the property, and we're still stuck on a foundation that has been repaired multiple times. It's leaking, it's cracked, and we have mold throughout the foundation. So I understand the intent to preserve things, but in order to preserve this house, there's not going to be much house left standing when it gets done. It's covered in transite asbestos siding, and it's covered in lead paint, and the ceiling, popcorn ceilings are of an age and size that they're almost positively going to test for asbestos.
And almost positive what?
It'll test positive for asbestos in the popcorn ceilings.
Because of the constitution of popcorn ceilings?
Huh?
Because of the constitution of popcorn?
Because of the age and the aggregate size, you can tell what time period that was sprayed on, and during that time period, all that popcorn texture was asbestos. So it's pretty commonly known that size of aggregate in that time period of being sprayed. And that was in the 70s during some of the renovation. So it's been now cut up into 4 units. So very little of the interior has any remaining value whatsoever. So when we look at what's there and what's original, very little of it is, and it's in a condition that's nearly impossible to salvage. So when we look at that and the intended use of it to be a single-family home, and we want to put, a family that has young children in there, we have all of these potential health hazards, right? And a building that's going to need to be abated to just about down to nothing, and then reconstructed around its frame. So when we look at all those things, we find, that with the intent of building a single-family home there, that there's not much you can do to salvage any of the existing building. So we spent a lot of time looking at that, and then when we designed the house, the way that it's designed is designed in a time period and and an architecture that's going to fit the architecture and time period of the houses around it. So those are the things that we took into all of our planning, all of our thought process, and that's the work that we did. And I hope you've had time to sort of review that and look at all of those factors. As far as what the proposed house is, if it helps some of the members that are here wondering about that, I do have a full-scale set in the truck. I could send Jake down right now to go get it, and people could have a look at it. That would make people feel a little bit better about what we're putting there. You could get a real chance to look at what the intent is. They are in that jacket. And as far as, and you can see, this is our planning for our construction. And it covers everything through the AIA code system, all the way from the demolition to the landscape, right? So it's been a very well planned out home. Now the intent with demolition is that we would handle it like we often do. We would have Associated Building Records come in, and they would do an abatement. They would file with the state, they would do their work, and the fact is the demolition would be a very short process. It would be a matter of days. We would put up fencing to completely keep the house and the site safeguarded from anyone getting into that other than construction personnel. It would go down very quickly, and the new home would be constructed and completed in about a period of 6 months. So that is the intent of the owner, that's the intent of us, and the intent is to try to put a new home that functions well, that is safe, and in keeping with the neighborhood.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, so my name is Neil Zhuang, and I've been a resident in Northampton for the past 8 years, so I understand the unique character of the town, and I do really love it. I am a physician, a thoracic surgeon to be specific, and I am a friend to the homeowner, and I'm mostly here to testify about the health risks of living in the house as it stands, given the fact that there is asbestos and mold and lead paint. So, just as you may know about asbestos, there is a risk for lung disease. It also increases the risk for lung cancer, and it also increases the risk for a rare type of cancer called mesothelioma, which unfortunately is almost always fatal. And unfortunately, the new family has young children, and we obviously don't want them exposed to that. Also, the mold in the building may cause problems with the lungs as well. There can be hypersensitivity reactions and problems with lung diseases as they become adults. And then finally, in terms of the lead paint, that is associated with multiple effects, in particular in children. The most devastating can be cognitive. It can affect brain development, but it can also cause problems with anemia and other diseases. So I think, given the description from the builder of the way that the house is, to try to preserve it as it is, and the fact that it may not even be completely original as it was built, it may not be possible in order to make a home that's safe for a family.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Is there someone I could lay this out that if afterwards people want to view, they can?
Sure.
Leave that right over here.
Okay, given, can you leave that out for a little while?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave it right there.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't want to have a scrum up here during the whole meeting, but if people would like to come up and look at that, perhaps towards the end of the meeting, that would be great. Other speakers? Yes.
So I'm also a doctor. I'm an MD, MPH. My name is Kirsten Killip. I'm a primary care doctor, also a friend of the homeowner. And I've personally treated children born and raised in Northampton in 1,800 homes with high lead levels. So I'm quite concerned about the idea of her bringing a small child into a home with known lead. It does need to be completely abated and dealt with. The child in question is a foreign adoptee and already has a high lead level. So exposing that particular child to more lead is actually more risky than any other child.
Thank you. Yes.
Not to be argumentative, but I mean, I got rid of all my lead by just painting my walls. So it just doesn't seem like one needs to demolish a house to remove lead. You encapsulate lead-based paint by covering it with latex. And I did have asbestos removed from my house as well. So I'm just, I guess not that I'm arguing that you don't need to demolish your house, but I'm just not sure if those are the reasons why you need to demolish your house.
Hi, I'm Paula Regano Murray. I live at 45 Finn Street, right next door, across the street. And from my perspective, you bought the house and whatever you want to, if you want to tear it down, that's your prerogative. I'm more concerned about what's going in and the size of it in the neighborhood, because it looks to me, from what I was able to pull up, that it's almost, my house is 2,000 square feet, and we're looking at an 8,000 square foot property going in, house going in it with the garage. And to me, that's 4 times the size of my house. And I don't understand how that's gonna just fit into the existing feel and coziness of the neighborhood. And that's more where my apprehension comes from. And so, that's
Thank you. Any questions? Anybody, please jump in along the way if you have.
Well, just,
questions
I
or
know,
comments.
I am a real estate agent and real estate broker, and so as far as buying older homes, any home that's
Could you
built-
speak up so we can hear back here?
I'm a real estate broker, and as far as purchasing any home built prior to 1978, there are lead laws, and any prospective buyer with children under the age of 6 would, as a matter of course, have to have the house de-leaded before the child can move in. So this in itself is not a unique situation. Asbestos is something also that people normally would want to have abated as well, so that they're not living with that. So I understand that this home does have its issues, but as far as a buyer purchasing it, I think that they were aware of that probably prior to putting an offer in, and so those conditions alone would not mean that the house has to be demolished.
Anyone else? Is there an independent licensed home inspection available for us? You're the builder, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
there's ours, but let me just go on for a second. There was not, because at the time, the intent and a lot of the selling agent, nor the homeowner, nor the buyer agent made it clear, because they weren't aware of this demolition delay. The intent was always purchasing the house to take it down. So as far as removing and abating, that was always it. And the inspection was waived because the intent was to take it down.
Well, it's always the buyer prerogative, and I'm not suggesting that there has to be, but I'm just wondering. if
So
this
there
is-
was not. And as far as the square footage of it, 1/3 of that space, and it's not. It's a little less than 7,000 square feet. Almost 1,000 of that is garage, and 1/3 of that, the remainder of the space is in the basement. So it's a 4,000 square foot house.
okay. It's still
Right.
twice the size of my house.
Sure,
is my
yeah,
point.
yeah.
I mean, their garage is the first floor
Sure.
of my house.
I'm just trying to clarify the square footage and not say that's 8,000.
Could you speak to the demolition process? You're going to be kicking up a lot of dust and asbestos. What are other folks in the neighborhood?
So the way that it works is that we use specifically companies that are designed to abate. This isn't gonna just be some company coming in and tearing it down. So Associated Building Records, that's all they do, right? So they're gonna come in, they're gonna secure the house, they're gonna remove it from all utilities. So there can't be any water main breaks, there can't be any electrocution, there can't be any gas leaks. Then they're gonna come in and they're gonna remove the asbestos from the outside and the inside. That's gonna get contained, right? And then that's gonna get moved. So no friable asbestos is gonna be just airborne. It's gonna get removed, it's gonna get contained, and then those containers get sent to a disposal company, and that gets registered with the state. That's the way that has to be done, right? And then the house will be then, once it's abated, then the house will be crushed on site. There will be an excavator there. It'll be crushed. There will be crews on site running water continuously, spraying the house down as it's crushed. It'll be put into trucks, and they'll be taken to a disposal site to be separated and then disposed of from there. So that is the demolition process. Okay. And I have probably pulled about 20 to 30 permits in the town of Northampton. I managed all the Upper Ridge construction for Wright Builders during that construction, and I've done a lot of demolition, so we've worked with the city to really be careful and think about the neighborhoods that we're in, and that's the same kind of care we're taking here.
As a point of fact, I have a question for you. On the permit application, the building area that I think you filled in has numbers that I don't understand. You want to take a look?
Yeah, let's take a look at it. Those are not, I don't know where those, oh, those are, yeah, I don't understand those either. I don't, that is not.
Can you correct
writing. Yeah, I can correct those. This is the existing house, correct? Yes, this is a demolition of the existing.
Yeah, it's certainly,
Okay.
it's over your signature, so I assume it's yours, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Right.
But
Well,
right-
I'll take a look at, yeah,
I need to
I
take
can
a
correct that.
But yeah, you'll correct
Yeah.
that with
Because this,
the
yeah,
building
those
commissioner,
are-
the building, yeah,
Sure.
Louis' office, okay?
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Yes.
Yes, I'm Carla Ness, the broker at DeLapp Real Estate. I'm also on the Cummington Historical Commission.
Oh, wow.
As co-chair. So we don't have a demolition delay in Cummington. Maybe we should get one, but we do not have one at one time. But I had a couple questions for the builder. You had said that when you did some research, that this house was built by the same builder as several other houses in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Do you know if that includes the house that's on the corner of Finn and Prospect that was recently turned to condos?
I do not know.
Yeah, because I just remember seeing that house. I know we haven't gotten into the opening up the
Could you address
walls.
us a little bit more? I'm just, because I'm so deaf, it helps me if I see your face.
Okay,
Thank you.
that house, I don't know if it was by the same builder, but it was definitely the same era. And a lot of what I see in these houses built in the 1890s is the floor structure that the builder was talking about, where the beams are pocketed, so you're not having the full structure. They tend to be overspanned. The house on the corner of Finn and Prospect, when it was all undone, the roof rafters were probably about true 2x6s. The walls were 2x3s. This era often also did not have fire stops in the walls. So, and there are quite a few houses of this era and style in Northampton. So is this particular one that's had additions to it and is in tough shape needing to be the ones that should be saved? I do not really feel that there's any huge architectural significance to this particular house.
Point of fact, this building was occupied until recently, right?
Yes, it
So-
was. It was occupied as a multifamily.
Was it fully occupied?
I don't actually know. Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Kevin Eastman lives there.
Yeah, other questions? Yes.
My name is Simone Topal, and I'm a physician in town, and I grew up here, so I'm very familiar with the neighborhoods. I grew up around that neighborhood as well. So I just want to vouch for the owner, who is a friend of mine as well, that she's not going to build a big ugly monstrosity that's going to tower over your house. I think it will be tasteful. And also I think the city has been doing a lot to provide affordable housing downtown, most recently with the big apartment building downtown, and which is many units. So I think the loss of the 4 units in a very
unsafe health-wise house is, weighed against the many new units that are being built downtown. Not such a huge loss in terms of rentable apartments.
Let me reassure you about a couple of things. One is, it's not our purview to consider the issue of numbers of affordable units downtown. That is a concern
This
of
is a
other commissions
concern
in
of
the
the
city, but we will not take that up one way or the other in this meeting. And as your first point, as a character reference of that, we have no doubt whatsoever. And we always, not only do we think highly of all of our applicants, but in this case, we have no questions whatsoever. So it is purely a matter of looking at buildings in that case. Thank you. Other comments? Yes, come on up.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pellegrin Gonzalez. I live at 310 Elm Street. Also a building that has asbestos in it. It's contained, it's sealed in a furnace, an old furnace, very old one. Can't have access to it. I'm sorry, your name escapes me, but the developer had really forensically broken down what this property has, and it's not something that's sealed or contained. And it's not a quick fix or something that can be sealed. This structure does have asbestos on the outside of it and on the inside of it. And we all know the hazard and the potential threats to being around that environment. And you don't have to live in it to be affected by it, especially if it's on the outside. When it's broken or breached, there's a hazard to everyone around you. Hence this other gentleman's concern about how it's going to be demolished. I love this town. There's a lot of history here. There's a lot of great places to see, and I get to enjoy that sporadically. But I don't think that this particular place is the one sole and only place that has to be saved, especially when it will be breaking it down to its foundation and probably having to redo that foundation. So what we want to protect or what we want to hold on to will be gone. If you duplicate that, it will be gone. And when you said that you're a licensed realtor, so if I may ask you a question now, would it be fair to say that if this home were allowed to be built, it would increase the value of the homes around it and the neighborhood? Would it be fair to say that?
Well, possibly.
Possibly, okay.
Possibly.
We're talking about a nice home.
That's outside the purview of our
Okay.
commission. And
We just broached that it's a big house and it's going to overtake other homes or something like that. But I mean, that would be a benefit if I was a neighbor. But that's what I wanted to share. So thank you for giving me this.
do you have any
opportunity.
connection with the applicant?
Yes, I am Dr. Neal's partner, and that's my friend, the owner.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Other speakers contribute. Happy to have any, are there any subsequent comments people would like to make? Yes.
Okay, my turn. So I'm Jaya Agarwal, I'm the owner. Nice to meet you, neighbors. I feel like either way I'm gonna have my back to somebody.
I'm sorry about that.
No, can I stand here?
Normally
Would that
the room
be
is
okay?
not
Is
so
that all
long.
right? Okay, all right. So I apologize, my husband can't be here. He had already had a business trip plans before this was scheduled. So I just wanted to explain how we got here, because you made the comments about we would have known about the lead and all those things. We used to renovate old houses in Boston, so Victorians and things like that. And when we had my son, he was 2 years old when he developed a very severe kind of asthma. It is more common in children of color raised in urban communities and older homes, in poorly maintained homes. So that ended our love affair with old houses. It was harder on my husband than on me. His family actually renovates historic homes on South Street in Philadelphia. So this was his family's business. So my son's asthma was cured entirely when we moved to a home that was built in the 1990s. And that is typical for that particular illness. And so when we moved to this community, we've been wanting to be a part of your neighborhood for a long time, and we've been looking for an opportunity. We've looked at, I think some of you have shown us houses, we've looked at very beautiful old homes, but we haven't chosen them because we knew that we couldn't live in an old home, and we didn't want to touch anything that was beautiful. So Ellen has been our trusted realtor for a long time. We met her through her partner, Dennis Stillat, the late Dennis Stillat, who just was a wonderful person, and Ellen really shares his standards of professionalism. She's always told us the pros and cons of anything that we have looked at, and we've taken up a lot of her time trying to find this place that had the community and the environment that we wanted, but that wouldn't put our son's health at risk. So when we saw 43 Finn, we told both realtors, look, this is a perfect spot for us, this is a perfect neighborhood, but due to the conditions of the house, we would have to demolish it. And they said fine, you don't need to do the inspection. We waived the inspection. The previous owner had wanted the boilers. We should, sure, take them. Why should we hold on to them? We're going to put energy efficient boilers in there. Anyways, it never occurred that the house looks, when you go inside, it looks like 1970s. There's not a tiny little flourish or anything that gave us, and I realized the information was probably there, somewhere there. It said 1890, but it didn't even occur to us to look. And I wish Mr. Nolan, the listing agent, was here, because he would tell you quite flat out that it looks like a dump, or at least that's what he told you, right? It didn't look. It was
here.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. It was. So I think you didn't know about the demolition delay. You were aware of it, but didn't think that it would be triggered by this particular.
Myself?
Yes.
I knew about it. I knew the demolition delay was enforced, yes.
Right. But your impression that it wouldn't be triggered by this particular building?
No, I didn't know if you were planning on filing a demolition delay right away, or if we decided to wait. It never came up in the offer or anything like that, so. The demolition delay has been on the books for how long?
When did the demolition delay start? 2005.
Okay, for a while, so.
So it was not an attractive. It's not an attractive building when you look at it. There's a little bit of detail on the front. When you go inside, it looks like the 1970s. Along the side, it looks like something built much more recently. So I don't think we ever thought that we were choosing an old home to take down. And so we hired Siegfried Porth as a well-respected architect who's been working in this community for decades to design a nice home that would look nice in the neighborhood, which is lovely. It is not bigger than it is not really substantively bigger than the current existing footprint.
What's the current footprint?
I don't know that. Do you know that, Jay? Do you know the dimensions off the top of your head?
But essentially,
I just think that might give us a better perspective as to what we're looking at, because then we have something to compare to
It's
in our
roughly the
mind.
same.
But you hear that
Yeah.
number and it sounds.
It's
Right.
roughly the same size. Remember, the current one has four apartments in it, right? And so each one of those apartments are not huge living spaces, but all four together, they do take up space. And there's that big parking lot there that takes up space. And so in its place, it is a larger family home. It's to accommodate my family and my aging parents. But it won't take up more space than what that building is taking up currently. It's roughly the same dimensions. It may be a little bit longer in one dimension and a little bit less wide in one dimension, I think is what happened, and that's because of the garage. So I don't think it's gonna feel that different, and it's gonna look nicer. It's just simple. It's black and white, black shutters, 2 levels, colonial building. We had it designed specifically to just sort of fit into the other lovely houses there. We actually had our architect look around at the other houses and add some of the flourishes that were there as well. I don't think that that's a concern. You've all seen the plans. If you have any concerns about it fitting into the neighborhood, please let me know. But I hope that would not be a concern. It is our desire to fit in. Again, we had, throughout this whole process that has now taken close to a year, it was bid on by 4 contractors. All the subcontractors came by. A lot of building professionals came by and looked at this place, and not one of them commented on, why are you taking this down? It's so lovely, it's so old, let's preserve it. We've worked with, just because we used to renovate houses in Boston, we worked with a lot of New England craftsmen, New England builders, and they're very quick to say, if you've got a nice feature in your home, they will say, the woodwork on here is lovely, the millwork is stunning. They will tell you immediately when something is recognizably worth preserving or worth commenting on. And not one comment was made about this building. So again, the demolition delay caught us by complete surprise. We had no idea that anybody would have an interest in keeping the building around. I'm going to quote Ellen's statements when I emailed you about the demolition delay. This is distressing because I'd never heard of this in 20 years of real estate. I'd never heard it mentioned. The listing agent has been in business forever, and he never foresaw a problem. Dennis sold a home in the South Street area, part of which is historic, and the buyer was able to demo it right away. I researched and could not find any history associated with it, and I don't think architecturally it has any interesting features. I cannot imagine that 43 Finn would be in either of these categories, historic or architectural. So this is just to say it caught us, that may be inaccurate, but it caught us by surprise. We really were not intending to take down something that was in any way valued by anyone.
No intention. Felt,
But it's important for me to say that, and I appreciate you not ascribing intention, but I want to make sure that that's clear. I want to focus my testimony on health aspects of the case. You've heard from my doctor friends. I can bring in more doctors if you like. But there are three main health issues related to the building: lead, asbestos, and mold. I'll spend very little time on the lead and the asbestos because to some extent we do know about those, but I do want to talk about the mold. There is a misconception about lead in buildings that it's only harmful if you have children that eat paint chips, or that it's only harmful if you're exposed to the exterior of the paint. Lead is throughout the building, and it has negative consequences for people of all ages. Children are just more at risk because their nervous system is developing. There is no lead level that is safe for any child. I want to explain where the idea comes from that you can make a home that contains lead safe. It comes from the experience that if you have a child with a high lead level in a building, and you go and you do the lead abatement, and then you retest the child, their lead level drops, but it doesn't go to zero. And they don't stop being exposed to lead. It's just that we've made a decision as a society that below 5 is an acceptable standard. But the American Association of Pediatrics and the CDC state very clearly there is no lead level that is safe in a child. And children should not be used as lead monitors. So it's something that the medical community actually disagrees with. My daughter in particular, she has two risk factors. One, that she's in a racial and ethnic category that for whatever reason, at the same level of lead, they have higher rates of cognitive delay. So she's at risk for that reason. And then the second reason is she has already had lead toxicity. She's 2 years old. I'm her 4th mother. We adopted her legally at the end of December. And she was just exposed to unsafe situations, so her lead level was very high when she came to us. It is now 0 after living in a 1990s home, and she is flourishing. It is just amazing what the change in the environment does. So we are very reluctant to have her anywhere near lead again, and that has been the medical advice given to us formally. The asbestos, the thing about asbestos is if you leave it alone, it doesn't do anything to you, right? And if you remove it completely in a responsible way, it doesn't do anything to you. If you renovate, if you disturb it in any way, even if you renovate we're using all the appropriate protocols, you can't, in a house like this where it's on the inside and on the outside, and it's basically part of the being of the house, you actually can't remove every single fiber. And the fibers that are retained are now disturbed, so they're much more likely to cause a problem. The other issue is even if we did nothing to the house, any sort of external injury actually also releases fiber. So allowing lead to stay in communities does give you that persistent sort of low-level risk of mesothelioma. Dr. Schwang will tell you that he treats people with this deadly cancer all the time who haven't engaged in any risky behavior. They haven't been drilling holes in things without using protective gear. They've just been living in communities and environments where there are old homes with asbestos. And like this woman had said, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, sometimes it's a matter of choosing what it is to preserve. We can't really sort of keep all of the asbestos around. Doesn't mean we should take down all the old homes or that people shouldn't live with them, live in them. We all do things that are risky. I think the biggest risk-taking thing that people do around here is skiing. But you have to live, and living life involves some risk. And so choosing to live in an old home is fine. You do your best to do the abatement, protect yourself. But living life is about risks. It is one thing to choose to live in an old home with asbestos, and another to sort of create, city policies and environments where people feel pressure to live in them when they don't choose to take on that risk themselves. But I want to talk about the mold. The widespread mold in the house is actually the biggest health risk. And so the mold is actually not the result of the age, but the result of neglect. So it's a function of inadequate cleaning, not properly fixing leaking roofs, windows, and pipes, and inadequately drying after flooding. Mold isn't good for anyone, but it can be deadly in individuals with respiratory conditions like asthma and COPD. In my family, that's my son and my mother. A lot of people are actually susceptible to mold, but you don't realize it until you live in a house for decades with mold. So it's insidious. It sort of comes upon you slowly. And that's the danger of mold. There are people that can live their whole lives in a moldy building and they're not affected, but the only way to find out if you're in either category is to live in a building with mold for 3 decades and see what happens. The reaction is what we call idiosyncratic. It interacts with each human being differently, so it's not predictable like lead and asbestos. This house doesn't have a patch of mold in the basement. It has mold, like Jay said, throughout the foundation and up into the walls. So if you open up the walls, there's mold there. And so it's systemic mold. And so the issue with systemic mold is that you never really get rid of it. So when you treat an infection in a human being, you always give the antimicrobials, the antibiotics, you have the patient take it for longer than it takes for them to feel cured. And that's the reason is you're trying to, microbes have a tendency to sequester themselves. And you're trying to get rid of every last bit because one little retained guy can blossom into a repeat infection. And that's in a patient with a healthy immune system that is performing constant surveillance. Buildings don't have an immune system. And so typically what happens is when you treat mold in a building, you might be okay for a little while, but it will recur. So the Institute of Medicine released a recent report on the health effects of mold in buildings and concluded that the focus of public health efforts should be on prevention because it's not clear that remediation ever works. Once you get this problem, it doesn't really go away. So my patients battling mold in their homes are doing it for decades. They feel better for a little while, they treat the mold and then they get sick again. And my advice to them has always been for the past decade is you may need to move. I don't think it's safe for anyone to live in a house with this kind of mold. It is particularly bad for people with the kind of asthma that my son has. So the last issue I want to talk about has to do with safety. We're lucky to live in a small town with a low rate of crime, but there is some crime. 43 Finn is a residential neighborhood, but it does border on a commercial district. There is a bus stop right on our property, so there's a bus stop right on Finn and Warfield. There's a bike path and park benches where sometimes people sleep, so it has that urban feel that we love. But my concern is with the demolition delay, we can't live there. And so in addition to sort of the financial hardship of maintaining 2 residences, we would have to board the building up. So when we got the notice that this might be delayed, the house has always been in a situation where you can kick open either the front or the back door and the basement door. And they open, the wood has rotted so that the latches don't actually work. So we've never even actually bothered to look for the key to the house. We could always just kick it open. So we did go and we boarded up. We've been very worried about allowing it to look vacant because we were worried that would bring crime into the neighborhood. So if you have a bus stop, we spent a lot of time in cities, so we worry if you have a bus stop where you get off the bus and there's a vacant boarded up building that it'll draw in crime. So we've not been trying to not make it look, we've been plowing the driveway and trying to make it look like people are living there, but if there's a year delay, our lawyer friends are telling us that we're responsible if anybody gets onto that property or does anything on that property. So we probably do have to be more vigilant. We're gonna have to board up the windows and we're gonna have to chain the driveway And we really just don't want to do that. In the short term, if anyone tries to sell their house during that period, it's going to look really bad. But in the long term, and again, maybe this is just my paranoia from spending so much time in big cities, but in the long term, when you bring that flow of traffic, that flow of crime there, it's hard to reverse that. And so we were just worried about that impact, that particular impact of a 1-year delay on demolition. The last thing, has to do with, someone telling us, well, you can just sell the house to somebody else that would want to renovate it. That was, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I don't think you'd have such an easy time selling it.
So that was my response to that. People weren't.
If we can, let's just have one speaker at a time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was just shaking my head in disbelief that somebody would tell her that, because that house was on the market a
I'd
long
be happy to
time.
have you come and speak after.
That's all.
After Thank you.
Sorry, did you have a question for? Can
No,
I not
question-
take questions? I cannot
No,
take questions.
no.
Okay, and now I
And you-
understand.
My bad.
Okay.
We got it.
When you're the speaker, you're not.
I know, we got
You're
it.
next. Okay.
I guess my feeling about that, my husband sort of reacted to it because it sort of felt like, well, why don't you people just get out of town? So he was upset for that reason. But partly also, we've been literally looking for 8 years trying to figure out how to move into this community, and we want to be there. It doesn't feel like our children's health issues and who we are should prevent us from being a part of this community. And the idea of selling it to somebody else, we could do that, but I don't think it would solve the problem. There's still systemic mold. It's still not a healthy place to live. There's still the problem of renovating it and trying to preserve the tiny little things that might be old, I think is near impossible. And also, it could be vacant for even longer than a year trying to find a buyer, which isn't advantageous to anybody. So I guess with that, we sort of decided we're going to try to make this work. In terms of, I was just trying to, we were trying to go through all the aspects of the demolition delay. I think there's an aspect of I think every part of Northampton town has historic value, right? The town's been around for a long time. So the merchants lived here and the butchers lived here, and every neighborhood tells a story, and I think this neighborhood tells a story. I'm not sure this house tells that story. If you were giving a walking tour of this neighborhood, I'm not sure that the place that the person giving the tour would stand would necessarily be in front of this building. There are lovelier houses and lovely old houses that are in this neighborhood that I think people might choose to tell the story of that neighborhood. When I tell people that we're moving there, everyone's familiar with the area, but nobody says, oh yes, that lovely yellow building. Nobody remembers, and it doesn't ring a bell, just like you may talk about, a prominent home or an old home on some other streets. Nobody recognizes it. It's not a central part of the cityscape or that neighborhood. And we thought about all of these things when we bought it, knowing that we were probably going to demolish it. We wouldn't want to take anything valuable away from town. In terms of the whole, the thing I can't do anything about was the concern about decreasing the amount of, you're right, we are taking 4 apartments and turning them into a single family. The only thing I can say in defense of that is that a friend of mine who lives on State Street is doing the opposite. He's taking a single family and turning it into 4 apartments. So I feel like it's kind of like you chop down a tree and your friend plants another one. But I am sorry for that, but it's...
For the sake of brevity of this meeting, and I'm sorry for interrupting,
Yeah.
that's not going to be on our agenda for
Okay.
making a decision.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can, we'll put that to rest.
Okay, all right. Then I guess I think that's all I have to say. I can certainly take questions from anyone who wants it. It's our desire to be an asset to the community and to the neighborhood. Yes.
We'll be happy to come back to you if you want to contribute later.
Okay.
I'm sorry, were you done?
Yes, I can be done.
Okay,
Yes.
we can, if you want to make a comment later, feel free. Yes, I promise you can go next.
Me?
Yes, you had a question.
So, I came here not more for information, not feeling one way or the other. And
what I'm gonna comment is what you said about the house on Finn and Prospect, which to me, Mrs. Pilock's house should have been a tear down, but it wasn't. And they turned it into a beautiful home. But I would also say that it's not quite like the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. And so I don't necessarily have that problem either. For me, it really was just coming here to fact find and understand what was going to go in its place. I am still a little apprehensive about the size, but, and I trust that it will be beautiful. I don't doubt you're not going to do all of this and put in some heinous house across the street from me. I don't think that. But in fairness, if Mrs. Pilock's house could look the way it does and be part of the neighborhood, then I think that there's nothing special about this house, other than the fact that Kevin Eastman rose to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fame in that house. There's nothing aesthetic about it that I think is any different than other houses and than the other houses around us. In fact, our house probably had more aesthetics once upon a time.
And just as a point of information for everyone here, our charge is not to look at just a single house as an exemplar of extraordinary architectural ability,
Right.
or this is the house that Calvin Coolidge lived in and so forth.
Right.
But to look not only at the individual house, but as the guidelines specifically say, in the context of a group of buildings. In other words,
Right.
in part of a neighborhood. If
Right.
there's a neighborhood that is of, let's say we were in Gloucester, and there's a neighborhood of fishermen's houses, and they're all modest, but they're all fishermen's houses. Any one of them is a modest house.
Right.
But together, it's a neighborhood of fishermen's houses. And so you could say that taking one down is not, it's easy because it is just one modest fisherman's house.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it immediately begins the destruction of a neighborhood of fishermen's houses. And so
I
there
could
is
see
that. We're
But
chartered with looking into that as well.
Right. But I also think you do have to keep in mind the house on the corner of Prospect and Fifth.
Okay, noted. Other comments?
I just have a comment about crime. So in addition to living on Moorfield Place, I'm the founder and director of an organization called the Real Cost of Prisons Project. And so I follow crime, not only here in Northampton, but around the country. And I mean, there's virtually no crime, especially breaking and entering in Northampton. So this idea that a house that looks empty is going to be this signal for people to be breaking in and somehow marauding in the house is just not the way it is here. I mean, you can check the crime statistics. The other thing is that, I don't know, I mean, as far as I know, there is no bus stop on Finn and Warfield. I mean, I pass that corner many times a day, and I don't see any bus stopping there. Maybe it's designated at some point as a possibility for a bus stop, but I've never seen, maybe there was once a temporary bus stop there or something. So anyway, I just feel like I need to just say these things. The other thing I have to say, as someone who's living on a fixed income, the idea that property values in the neighborhood is going to go up is not exactly a great piece of information.
We all hate to write those checks, but that's not our purview.
I know, I'm just saying that was what he said, and I just feel like, you know, as someone who has to deal with the rise of taxes, that to me is not a selling point. That's not a selling point at all.
Thank you. I've been very generous. I've been very generous with allowing time, particularly with the homeowner, because we totally want to have all the information in front of us before we begin our public debate or discussion. But let's take one more. Go ahead. Two more.
Denny Nolan. I was the listing agent for the sale of that 43 Penn Street. A couple of things. It's a 4-family, not a 5-family. Someone mentioned it might have been. And actually, I don't know their family, but I'm guessing that there's probably going to be more people living in the new house than there were in the displacement. There's only 5 people in that house. There were 3 single rentals and a twosome.
Not our business.
No, I'm just saying, because it
Okay.
came up. And then the other thing is, historically and architecturally, integrity and so forth, I was actually the beginning founder of the historic district, the Elm Street Historic District, 1994, April 17th, I think, to check the records. And so I spent another 12 years on the board, and we've been through many, many things about what is significant historical. In my opinion, if I was still on the board, the house does not, in my opinion, have any significance in terms of letting it stand longer than it needs to.
Thank you. Yes.
My question is basically to address the purpose of this hearing is to determine whether the demolition delay should be put into effect, the year's wait.
Yes.
And possibly some other person could come along and want to restore the building in that time period.
Not other person necessarily, but sometimes there are things that a homeowner, when faced with the potential of or the consideration of the historicity of a building, says, well, maybe we can do this or this or this. And we've seen a variety of steps taken in order to preserve, and not necessarily to simply take the house the way it was sold to them, but still make changes, but not destroy historical fabric of the neighborhood by doing so. It's an attempt to have that dialogue, that's all. And it doesn't have to last 12 months. That's an outside maximum.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of clarify that the focus of this is kind of narrow in the sense that it's about the year delay or not the year delay. Am I
Basically,
correct in
yes,
that?
that's it.
Okay, thank you.
But we also, the whole purpose of having the demo delay ordinance was to inspire conversations, not to be punitive. And that's very important. Nobody's trying to make a homeowner delay. We recognize that people have lives, they have families, they need to move forward with their housing. And either, there are going to be cases where we have said, no, you really need not to tear this building down. And there have been institutions to whom we've said that here in town, and they have waited the year, and at day 366, they took the building down.
Yeah.
But there have been other cases where there has been thoughtful discussion and has resulted in steps being taken by the homeowner to make any changes be more historically sensitive. And those have been very positive changes that have helped the city as a result.
Thank you.
And that's the real intent.
Thank you.
And one final, and then we've got to have a discussion amongst ourselves right here in tonight's meeting. So but I wanted to have these comments first to inform us. Is there a, would anybody like to go first with comments?
I can speak a little to the history of the house. So probably the best information we have on what it originally looked like was it was actually one of the House brothers, who were itinerant photographers who traveled all around Western Massachusetts and Vermont and the area, photographed the Boudway family, the original owners, out in front of the house. This is owned by Historic Northampton. I apologize, it's not very high resolution. But
And we'll show this to the
so you can see some of the features and you can see the difference. Unfortunately, the porch, the greenery around the porch is very overgrown, so you can't really see all that much. But you can see the gable. And the Boudway family owned it from the 1880s when it was built through the 1950s. So it's essentially one owner, several generations of the same family owned it. Mr. Boudway was a fire chief for the city of Northampton for 10 years and the manager of the Academy of Music for 30 years. So not a famous person outside this community, not Kevin Eastman, but of some importance locally. I've been in the apartment on the first floor 20-something years ago. It seemed like a very old house at that point. I judged it a 1970s house based on the external appearance either, but, that was 25 years ago, and I don't know what it's going to be.
Thank you. And could you pass it down to the audience when you're done with them? Okay. I have some comments, and there, if anyone wants to respond to them, that's fine. Perhaps the homeowner would like to see them first. A lot of the, and please don't take my comments as indicating the direction of my intention to vote on this tonight, but I do want to make some comments, and that is that a lot of the comments made about the house actually fit a very, very large number of houses in Northampton. The use of oddly sized lumber, length of span of certain joists, the way they're put together, the presence of lead, asbestos in one place or another, whether it's a furnace or siding or insulation. Sometimes bizarre wiring, knob and tube. And it certainly doesn't need to be an old house. It could be a 5-year-old house and have problems with mold in it. That's not an age issue specifically. So a lot of what we're talking about, and decrepit molding, which I hope you wouldn't find at my house, but you might, is there are issues that homeowners of older houses routinely address because they're older houses and because that's what happens with them. You abate the lead, you contain the asbestos, or you hire a company to remove it. You get a carpenter to fix the trim. If the dimensionality of lumber doesn't conform to current code, well, you sort of have to make a decision whether I hire somebody to come and sister some joists, or do I leave it the way it is because it doesn't bother me and the house is still up after 180, 140 years. I think those are common questions that are addressed by owners of older houses. Virtually none of the issues that were raised tonight are issues that have not been addressed by owners of older homes in the city. And if they were individually or even as a group cause for tearing a house down, then a very large part of Northampton would be torn down. That's not the case, fortunately, but I want to say that further, we are not here to protect solely the glamour houses of the city. There are some lovely houses of the pre-independence period. There are houses in the Georgian in mid-century, late 19th century. There's some lovely houses in the 20s, and then there are a lot of just normal houses that are part of the community. Houses that were built carefully, but are not going to be an Architectural Digest or some historical magazine because they don't stand out that way. But they are part of the community, and they tend to be surrounded by similar houses. They're in a community. They're not off in a field, and so that's why the regulations that we have to abide by do identify that we have to look at a building in the context of a group of buildings. In this case, a group of buildings that were built, according to the testimony here, at about the same time, in a Victorian style, Victorian period, with stick features and interesting gable treatments and treatments above the front roof porch bays, and there may be more. I'm not sure, but the whole form and style of the house conforms with the other. The bay window, for example, on the King Street side of the house, conforms with the other houses that are built in the neighborhood. And if you put a 1970s house in there, it would look completely different. And if you put a 1950s house in there, it would look completely different, and it would stand out like a sore thumb. The fact that the interior has changed quite a bit is a different question. That's technically beyond our purview. I will say that even in places with extremely strict regulations about the exteriors of the buildings, people often take pride in how modern the interiors are of their building. And if you have a loft in a tenement, a loft in Soho, you would think nothing that was built in, let's say, I don't know, the 1880s, the same period. You would think nothing of having a very, very modern interior with granite counters and trendy stuff right now, and you feel okay about it. And the city would say, well, that's okay too. The interior of your house doesn't have to be a museum. So the inside of this building seems to be stuck in the 70s from what I'm hearing. It doesn't sound too appealing. I hope there's no orange shag carpeting, but it's also not evidence that the outside of the building doesn't comport with a neighborhood quality of Victorian houses. And so, because the interiors have always been allowed to float and change and respond to the era of whenever it is that the owners remodel. So we know, it sounds like a very, I mean, the way it's been portrayed, we certainly are, and take to heart the very careful and thoughtful and very helpful comments about mold, about asbestos, about lead. I will say, given the interior state of the house, it sounds like the interior trim is a goner anyway, and undesirable, and may be tossed, and certainly could be according to our rules. So I'm not sure that the interior trim is even relevant to our needs, because it doesn't sound, it may not even be original. But the exterior trim certainly would, and exterior, any painted appurtenance would certainly have lead on it. So we're I feel like a little bit caught, because there is something about that house that does strike people. Actually, contrary to what I heard tonight, not to be contrary, but I do have, when I mention the house to people, they say, oh yeah, they know that house, because a lot of people pass it every day. And it's pretty, and it's yellow, and it's got, everybody remembers the beautiful gable treatment. I don't see, and I'm going to let the committee speak in just a moment, obviously, but speaking for myself, I don't see any value in boarding the house up for a year, hoping for the best, crossing our fingers, and I'm not quite as sanguine about crime, but I don't see the value in that, and then bring it to the ground a year from now. I would like to see if there's some compromise that can preserve that appearance of the house that's there, the volume it fills, the type of trim it has, the way it sits on the lot, and yet also allows the homeowner to respond to the very real and very genuine health concerns that she, of course, has for the well-being of her family, which I'm very sensitive to. So I would hope that there's some room for compromise or for discussion or change during the course of either this meeting or in subsequent meetings. We are here to talk and not to punish and not to overregulate, but we also here to protect the fabric of all the neighborhoods of the city. So if I haven't worn you out by now, and I see I have worn out Jan and Nick, who are frequent visitors to this meeting, let me stop and turn it over to other members of the commission. Can you speak?
I'm going to recuse myself from this vote because I work with Denny and Carla.
Okay.
And Ellen, and so I just don't.
Okay.
But I don't know if that precludes me from making comments or not. Am I?
Just informative. I wouldn't lend your advice, but if you have informative comments.
Okay, no, it was just what you had said, that just because a home has mold or lead doesn't mean that it should be, that's the reason that it should be demolished. That was, the point that I was trying to make earlier.
Yeah, I just have a few other additional comments, 'cause I know this has gone on a long time. Also, I concur with your comments about the mold. This area has a very high water table. I hope you're aware of that and have done proper geotechnical studies. I would hate to see your basement full of water. I know I live nearby and we have had a lot of issues with water. I believe this receives all the drainage from Round Hill. So that probably is part of the mold problem. So that would be, and also just, I know many residents of Northampton have had a terrible problem with mold, especially this past year, because we had such a humid summer with a lot of rain. So that happens and probably will continue to happen in the future. Just a couple of comments about the history. I think David brought this up, that vernacular buildings are very much a part of this community. You know, there were high-style buildings built on Elm Street and some of South Street neighborhoods, but many of the buildings in the city are what we would call vernacular. And by definition, they're simple. And so by looking at a building that has limited detail on it, doesn't mean that it's not significant and it doesn't have value. I think we also have to be very careful to speak about neighborhoods and structures within them and speak about them and the value of them without really knowing the story behind them. So I appreciate, Dylan, your research on that. And again, it's important to know, because the stories aren't all stories about really important people. Sometimes they're about very simple people. Just for example, in Florence, it's very likely that there's going to be a new National Register district up there, and I would say probably all of the houses in that are vernacular minus. But it was a very rich community, you know, dominated by the African Americans who lived in this area in the 19th century. So very important to preserve, even though the buildings are not anything that you would probably notice as being valuable. And then finally, I just have to register this for the record. I do think the real estate community really fell down on this. I think that you, as professionals, need to be aware of what the ordinances are in the city that pertain to the future of buildings that you are marketing, and to make your prospective buyers and sellers aware of those. You know, we cannot be on the front of that. You have to be. So I really hope that you take that into consideration, because this is going to happen again. And as stewards of the historic properties in the city, you know, we're put in a very difficult position, and you're contributing to that. So please take that to heart.
And I just want to say that the hearing before this, which was a much simpler discussion, because it was determining whether or not we felt the building was historically significant, and obviously we did, which triggered this hearing, this public hearing, to determine if it's preferably preserved. But I think, you know, when we looked at the building, we had seen the Form B, which is the historic inventory form, and, you know, in walking around it, you know, I'm sure all of us, I mean, I know I was aware that clearly the additions were much later, much more recent additions, but to me, it was, you know, on the street, it's in part because of the space around it, the size of the house in relation to the size of the lot. It has a strong presence on the street. It does reflect the architecture, and again, this more modest architecture that's in the neighborhood. And I voted to find it historically significant, in part because I felt it really does contribute, particularly those details that are there. So I just want to make you aware of maybe, I don't know whether we really talked about what it was that really made us do the first determination, which triggered this hearing. So that's really all I have to say.
Don't.
Yeah, no, and I think there's 2 additions onto the back of it, correct?
Right.
Yeah, the 1.5 story directly behind the thing is actually there as early as 1915. It's on the Sanborn Fire Insurance map, so that's over 100 years, and enough just seems significant in and of itself, just that part of it.
Thanks for clarifying that.
That's all.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Thank you for bringing those pictures. One of the things I noticed about the pictures was the detail. I love all the homes we create, we remodel all the homes. But the majority of the significant architecture is gone. The siding, where you have banded trim and different siding from level to level. There's some cornice pieces, those are all gone. And the features, the 3 features that are left, 2 of them have been heavily modified, right? So we're talking about from an architectural point of view, 80 to 90% of the original house, from an architectural point of view, is either covered with asbestos or it is completely missing. And the other thing I just want to make a point that you guys try to realize is that we build according to the 2015 IRC and the mass amendments. And part of one thing that you're going to end up running up against is as we get way more highly regulated in how we build and renovate, it's going to make it much more difficult to be able to take an old house and renovate it for a new use and be able to salvage much of it at all. And with the new EPA lead guidelines and the new IRC and the 2018 on its way, again, it's not just that these old houses have structures that, yes, the floors sag and yes, that's legitimate. Once we get beyond a certain point, then once the city determines that we're beyond 50% of the original house, we're gonna have to bring the whole thing up to code, right? So when we do that, then we have to do all these things that aren't so simple as keeping some of the old house. We're required to do these things. It's not building that it was 15 years ago. The codes are completely more regulated, completely more stringent. And the insulation packages, we've got to get an R49 in the ceiling. It just jumped 10 years ago to R30 and everybody was blown away by that. We have to get R22 in the walls. We have to insulate the foundation. So we're gonna be covering this building over and restructuring it just to meet the requirements of the code. So when I look at the architectural features of the house, which thank you for bringing those pictures, and I see how much is diminished and what we'll have to do by building regulations and EPA regulations to do a heavy retrofit to the house, that's why we've come and done such a careful look at the house and why it would be such a massive undertaking and very little of the house would ever be able to be maintained. So that's where our point of view is coming from.
So we don't know what it looks like underneath the asbestos siding at all?
We have no idea.
And the asbestos siding, when it's removed, is removed by licensed technicians?
Yep.
And their license depends on what?
Their license depends on being licensed with the state for abatement. It's a stringent process and there's only a handful of companies that can actually do this work.
Okay, so what do they certify after as a result of their abatement procedures?
So they have to file with the state and show that all of the abated materials have been contained, sent to the proper distribution areas, and contained properly. So like asbestos ends up in large containers, sealed containers, and it gets sent down, gets filed in Boston and brought to a processing center to deal with it. Because what happens once you start affecting asbestos, unless you immediately contain it, you keep it wet during it, becomes friable, which means all the small fibers become airborne. So that's why there's only a few companies that are truly licensed to do this work. Western Mass Demolition, Associated.
It sounds pretty effective.
It is effective.
Yeah.
But
Can I
the problem
follow
is it's also very destructive. Once they get under there, they're going to be affecting the lead, which means they have to meet the EPA standards, right? So if they want to they get in there and they destroy the siding, if there is siding truly underneath there, they're going to wreck it, pulling all of this transite siding off. And now if they have to remove that siding, then that all has to be contained properly, and a whole nother phase of abatement goes.
My personal reaction is I certainly see the dollars rolling up at that point. I mean, any building can be saved, because it depends on whether you're Bill Gates or not.
We'll spend $2
right?
million doing it, yeah.
So, On the other hand, there are houses, lots of houses that are saved by enthusiasts and people who want to live in that house, as you know, and you probably worked with some.
Yes.
So it's not an either-or thing. There are people who do it, people who don't, and it's a trade-off at some point. And I also don't know, I don't think we're prepared to know tonight whether anything that was being proposed would actually trigger the state or the city requiring 2019 building code construction.
Well, we're in 2015 currently.
Point taken. 2015 building code, to be applied to here, it depends on what gets built.
It's an
I
action.
guess, I mean, we're at a point, again, because of the time, and I did not want this to go all night, where I probably can move the meeting forward and ask you and the owner, your interest. We could either take a vote right now about preferably preserving the house, which would put into place a up to 12-month
So that decision's been
demo
made.
delay, or we could talk right now about whether, as a result of this discussion and hearing community comments and scientific comments, character comments, which I love and appreciate, and those are good, and comments from us, whether there's enough for a discussion about something that would
compromise?
That would, I guess it's a compromise, I don't know, I'm looking for the right word, something that would allow the homeowner to feel safe, or not just feel safe, but be safe in the home. It would address community concerns about appearance, it would address our mandated concern about not destroying a Victorian era community that was built, as you pointed out, right about at the same time, that is pretty well seen. It's not hidden away. It's well seen by thousands of Northamptonites every day, and allow this to move forward without anybody feeling like they've been treated badly. So, or that anything has been not addressed properly. So, what between you and the homeowner, is there an interest in, because this would be sort of a momentary breather to say, yeah, let's talk about that. Are there some issues that, or we could go to a vote, and then even if we went to a vote, and even if as a result of that vote, we did vote to perfectly preserve this and imply the demo delay, we can still continue to meet about that frequently and do a compromise later. So it's not like it has to happen tonight, but I do see this juncture.
Sure. So I will let the owner speak, but my understanding going forward is that in order for her to build the home that will be safe for her and her family and fit the configuration of what she needs for her parents to join her as they age, that the compromise would be that we could talk about taking some of the elements from the existing house and add them to the new, but keeping that house on that foundation with the poor water management. We talk about mold and issues. I know building in Northampton. I've built 23 houses in Northampton.
Yeah.
You have to deal with water management, and you have to do it from the foundation, or it's a fail.
It's not something that they had a water hospital on the top of that hill, right?
So you have to do it from the ground up. So adding some elements from the old house to the new and making it, so that the appearance of it has some of the features or features that are similar on the new house. We've talked about the possibility of doing something decorative in the gables and expanding the porch on the side that may then reflect more of what the house and some of the elements were.
I think we're making progress. That's very interesting. I like that idea. I mean, it originally that house had major gable features on both sides of both streets. Originally and currently, the house has a front porch with 3 bays to it that also had arch decorations on it. And it also, I mean, the design as sent to us appeared in the style of Georgian colonial. And so it also has, I think, it's just my opinion, unfortunately, it has a monolithic quality to it because the entire garage is treated as if it's part of the house rather than what in a real Georgian colonial it would have been as a secondary addition, so there would have been a break in the roof line that more or less defines that the house is not one big monolith.
Can I just interrupt for a
Yeah.
second? Do you mind? Excuse
No,
me.
no.
Sarah.
Usually this is where the good part happens, when she interrupts.
May I just have confirmation? My understanding of the process is that in order to start negotiating with you about design, which is not really our purview.
We're not negotiating so much, we're just discussing.
Well,
yeah.
we're
Still in discussion.
discussing. We need to make a determination, correct?
Correct. So
And so-
if the commission determines that the house is preferably preserved, it could then have a discussion about whether an alternate plan might be appropriate.
But
and-
we can't have the discussion until we've
Is that right?
had an
Oh.
until we've made that determination.
Yeah, because if the commission doesn't determine that the house is preferably preserved,
Then-
there's not really any,
There's no discussion.
yeah, there's no discussion.
Correct.
About
Yeah.
changes to their proposal.
I see the logic, I guess, yeah. But I return to the point that the demolition delay is the outside figure is 12 months, but we've worked with people for as little as 1 month to resolve questions. So if this is just a step for a procedural reason, then we could do that. I'm delighted to hear what you're saying. So just to sum it up, there would be some room for discussion about some exterior design changes that might bring the building, a new building, that meets the homeowner's needs into
What I would say.
more of an appearance that matches the rest of the neighborhood?
Well, I think what we would, the things that we would consider would be an expansion of the side porch to get rid of some of the monolithic that you're talking about, and that we would talk about some gable features for a trim feature, that it may not be exactly the stick, style construction of the Victorian that's there, but certainly something in that keeping. But as far as the general layout of the home and structure of it, all we could do to break out the siding is consider a banding trim, an expansion of that porch, and some gable features is something that we'd be willing to discuss.
Okay. Questions about procedure from board members?
I have a question. Does the vote have to happen tonight? Because my husband couldn't be here at all.
Your husband couldn't jump in?
She asked if the vote had to happen tonight because her husband could not be here.
Oh, don't know.
If the applicant agrees to an extension of the time frame by which the historic commission has to make a decision, then the hearing goes over to continue.
Yeah, I suppose you could wait. It would mean they can't do anything, but yeah, I mean, if you wanted.
Yeah, I guess I just didn't understand. Like, I was nervous about
Sure.
the decision being made and then just not really being able to recover from that.
The
And
decision
would
we
it be
make tonight.
made without my
Yeah.
husband having the opportunity to say anything? I mean, if this is your policy and procedures, I guess you have to do it, but it's,
I have another question to kind of follow up on her question.
Sure.
Is if, what you're saying is that if you vote tonight that it is significantly historical, that doesn't mean that they necessarily have to do it. It means that we just go into more discussions, correct?
It can mean that, yes. Yes, if you agree to it. And the advantage to that is that if we do determine it to be preferably preserved, and there's a maximum of a year on it from the time you file your building permit, if you come back to us in a month and we have a discussion and, there's modification agreed upon, we could lift the delay.
I mean, our,
So the advantage would be that the clock starts now versus if we delay, if we extend the meeting for another month, because you
Yeah,
only need
that's
one
true.
No, it
month.
doesn't. The clock
What?
starts when the
When I pull
permit
the
is
permit.
filed.
Yes, so the
Right.
clock has
So-
already started.
The clock has already started.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know when the permit application was filed, but it was a few months ago, right?
January?
January? Yeah, so January.
so,
And if the commission doesn't feel that they have enough information to make a decision today, then the hearing should certainly be continued. If you all feel comfortable that you're,
well, if
you
the
have
applicant wants to
everything that you
delay, I
need.
think, you know,
That's up to you.
we certainly don't want to make you feel rushed in any way. I mean, we've heard comments about its historicity. We've heard comments about the challenge of preserving the existing building. We've heard comments about neighborhood concerns. We've heard, I think, really good array of comments that are relevant to this. If you would like to delay us voting, I don't know if that's normal, but I'd be happy to defer to your wishes if you want that.
How, I mean, would you meet again? Would there be another meeting or?
Yeah.
Yeah, we meet monthly. We can meet again.
Okay.
I mean, we know more about its historicity now than we
Yeah.
did before, frankly, and so I don't know that that's going to go away. But we also see that you guys are working in good faith to try to respond to building concerns and neighborhood concerns, we understand better now about the health concerns that you have and that you spoke to so eloquently. So we can delay if you like. We can vote tonight if you like, whatever you want.
I liked your original idea of trying to come to an agreement and not sort of passing this delay to begin with, but maybe that's not procedure possible for you. I guess that's what I was.
I'm just, because I'm.
Well, unfortunately, the procedure doesn't really work like that. The way it's structured is, in order to negotiate with you, like, I use personally, it sounds like a, deal or something, but in order to talk with you about modifications that we would see that would honor the needs of the neighborhood, the wishes of the neighborhood, and balance those with the wishes of the homeowner, we have to vote to determine that it be properly preserved. Then we can launch into those discussions. If we vote to just allow the demolition, then there's no discussion for us to have with you. Because at that point, you can do whatever you want. Unless it's not a multi-family property, so you could do whatever you want. Otherwise, you'd go through planning review. So, planning board review. Does that make sense? You look confused.
Or we could vote to delay the vote.
We could vote
Or
to
we could
delay the vote.
Grant
till
a
the next
delay
meeting.
of the vote
Yep,
by your
delay the
wishes
hearing.
and continue next month.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't be negotiating.
Yeah.
Right.
in that.
Yeah, we
It's
wouldn't be doing
continuation.
anything
It's just a
between now and then.
continuation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we didn't really sort of, I don't know that I agreed to all those things about the porch and the garage, so I felt,
So you need to have some conversation amongst yourself about it.
Sure.
And it sounds to me like, well, I hope it's okay. It sounds to me like a delay, our next meeting is the 25th, I think. And I don't know whether we have room on the agenda for it, but we would so that's, 2 weeks from now?
so, I mean, if you already know how you're gonna vote, it may not make sense. So if there's nothing we can do to influence you to not pass the properly preserved, then you might as well. Then it makes sense to just do it. If there was anything we could offer to agree to do this, that, or the other, so that didn't happen, then that would be useful. But if that's not the case, then.
I think the question of what you can offer is actually would be triggered by us declaring it needed to be preserved, because then if you said, well, what about if we did this, then there was more related to the preservation of the neighborhood, because that's the phrase under which we would be preserving this. We could act very quickly with that, and I would vote to do that. But apparently, because of the procedural regulations, we need to find it preferably preserved. We need to enact the delay before we can then cut short the delay, because if we never acted, if we never put the delay on, we can't cut it short.
So can I just say one other thing that might
Yeah.
impact on it? So our next meeting is the 25th, it's this month,
Yes.
25th, and I will not be here at that meeting. So if she's recused, would we still have a quorum
So
on the 25th?
if the hearing is, if the commission continues the hearing and does not make a decision at this point, then we would need all of you present at the next meeting. If the commission makes a decision, either preferably preserved or not, then the hearing is over and it would just be an agenda item going forward at that point, if it ever were to come up.
Because it's the same hearing, so we all have to be here.
Yes, if it's
It's
continued.
just continued.
So Craig's presence wouldn't make a difference anyway, because he didn't.
So you didn't participate in this meeting?
I'm sorry for all the procedure
Yeah.
questions, but it's relevant to.
I just wanted to alert
a very
you
serious
that it-
request.
because it
so
does have
it's worth taking
it does
time.
have an impact on the
If Craig watched the
meeting.
video and filed disclosure that he was up to speed on everything and saw the full video, then he could potentially vote.
Okay.
If the hearing were continued.
If he's going to be
If
there.
he's going to be.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking he could recuse himself
could.
for the same, because he's a real estate broker as well.
Right. So we only have 6 people on the commission at the moment, and there would be 3 of us voting, and that's not a quorum, or not a majority.
So the intent of the alternate plan, if the commission finds the building to be preferably preserved, would be a finding that even with the issuance of a building permit, the intent and purpose of the demolition review chapter is served. So even with the house being demolished, the inclusion of porches or architectural features are just as good as the original building being there.
Because it's basically honoring the intent of the
Yes.
original structure, which I think is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to see some
Yeah.
evidence of that, but yeah, that could work too. I mean, in other words, perhaps some design, some redone exterior designs and so forth.
But any discussions about that moving forward, if the building were to be determined preferably preserved tonight, would be outside the public hearing process. So you wouldn't necessarily need the same composition to do that.
You wouldn't necessarily need one.
You'd need the same
Same people.
composition of the commission to do
Yeah.
that,
You just need the same people here to make the vote.
because it's a public hearing.
Right.
Okay. This sounds odd, but in order to help you, what I sense is on the commission is that there is a desire to work with you and your builder on some accommodations that might address your needs for a safe and clean house and the city's needs for preservation of a nice Victorian community that was developed there, and the neighbors' needs for having a sense of continuity and preservation of the neighborhood. We would like to do that with you. And it would, I believe, result in a house for you, a new house for you, without a tremendous number of changes, perhaps, I hope. I don't think that's pie in the sky. From what I've seen and what I've heard tonight, I think it's all possible. And that's what the demo delay is supposed to do, frankly. So if we can, if you're game, we're game to work on this together in order to make that that conversation occur. It appears that we need to put a demo delay on it so that we can then end it. Right now, you don't have a demo permission, really. And so we would like, if we're gonna get you over that hump, we need to you put in a demo delay and then meet very soon. I hope you guys can work with us on this and look at any revisions and then hopefully remove the demo delay so that you can proceed this spring with your efforts. So that would be our intent. And so we're not unreasonable, and we're certainly willing to work with you and willing to come back together again. So how does it sound so far to you?
I mean, it doesn't sound like there's another option, right?
I didn't hear you.
It doesn't sound like there's another option.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
we're supposed to do what we're supposed to do here, and it's
I understand. I respect your process.
I think it would result in you getting a new house on that site. So I think the bottom end, I mean, the final point, I think is good. I think that there might be.
I'll respect your decision. I'll respect your decision and your process. There's not another option.
Okay, fair enough.
So we need a motion?
Yes.
Should I make a motion? I will make a motion that we vote that, on whether the building at 43 Finn Street in Northampton should be determined preferably preserved.
I'll second it.
Okay, is there discussion? There being no discussion, please signify your approval by saying aye.
Aye.
And your opposite, one abstention. We would like to meet with you. I can be happy to talk with you at any point, or talk with Sarah about clarifications on any point of regulations, and hope to see you on the 25th of this month to move forward with this discussion. If you've listened to the community, the folks who spoke here, some of whom are here and some are not, but and you've seen evidence of what the house itself looked like. You know what the existing neighborhood looks like. You know what our concerns are, and our charge from the city to look at the community. And if you can try to blend those together and come back with some proposals, I think you'll find some open ears. Okay. Anything else to be said on this? Okay, so we put in a demo delay, but hopefully it will not last long. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And just so you know that we have had this discussion through our office to make sure that everyone in the future does know that there is a demolition delay in Northampton. So we'll hopefully never be in this position again.
And don't forget the local historic district, that's a factor too.
I just wanted to take it from you.
And I wanted to personally apologize for my error in not knowing about it. When I started back with Dennis in 2000, I remember having places torn down and there was no problem. I knew about the historic districts and all that, but just...
Well, believe it or not, we actually even broke clients that were moving into the historic district itself, which is, you would never do. But,
Thank you.
And then they were quite surprised about what they can and can't do. That happened this year.
I feel absolutely awful about this.
It's gonna have a good outcome.
Just spread the word.
It'll have a good outcome. It will. Yeah.
Just spread the word.
It's gonna have a good outcome. It always does.
Certainly. Well, I don't read the Gazette, I subscribe to the Gazette, so I'm not trying to...
Okay, we're not.
Remember from 2000, that era where Dennis torn down and home, so, if it wasn't the historic district, then it didn't matter. So I sincerely apologize. And I have to my client.
We're gonna get back. Call to order.
That's great.
You're welcome to look at the plans if you can do it quietly. The next item on our agenda is, what number?
Could you maybe take those in the hallway too?
I don't know.
Hey, the folks reading the plan, would you mind taking this out in the hallway? We have a continuation of the meeting here.
We're gonna be, no problem.
You're welcome to look at it.
Public hearing is closed, but we're not done.
Yes.
You guys have a long night. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, what number? Jim? 74.
I think that my colleagues.
Dyslexic, okay. The next item on our agenda is review for the same purposes on 47 Chapel Street in Northampton.
And this is only the initial determination of significance, so this discussion was limited only to those items that were listed in the statute.
Judy,
Sorry.
are you getting it?
No, okay, yeah.
Okay,
I'm
we're on our
sorry.
way now.
We're talking about the Cooley Dickinson?
Are we doing, no, we're moving
47
up.
Chapel.
We're moving.
Okay, just,
Okay, sure, yep, yep.
Sarah, can you recite what you just said?
Okay, so this is not determining whether this structure should be preferably preserved, but only an initial determinant of significance. So rather than considering the entire world of historic preservation possibilities, it's limited to the items that I provided in the statute. So the building is listed on, or within an area listed on the National Register of Historic Places, found eligible by the Park Service, to be eligible for National Register listing. Importantly, associated with one or more certain persons or events, or with the broad architectural, cultural, political, economic, or social history of the city, or is historically or architecturally important in terms of period, style, method of building construction, or association with a recognized architect or builder, either by itself or in the context of the group. So that this last one was the reason why.
So
the structure we were just discussing.
hopefully you all had a chance to either view the pictures or to go by the building yourself.
But
Is there,
Dylan has additional information, right, about the history of the building?
Not of huge importance.
But to be shared.
The family who lived there were upholsterers. They worked on Main Street. They didn't seem to use the home for their business.
I can address that.
Yeah.
are there comments
This
from
gentleman can address that as well. I don't know if I know it's not a public hearing, but I'm hoping that we can hear from somebody. But
yeah.
because the building, a lot of the houses in that, I live in that neighborhood, but I don't think I've
Right.
used myself. But that building was one of a number of houses in the neighborhood that were owned by members of the Elliott family, some of whom were upholsterers,
Right.
and they used the building next door, which still stands.
Okay.
And that, I believe that's right, Ben, that was the upholstery shop. You're gonna get to speak, don't worry. But another member of the Elliott family lived there, and some were employed at the state hospital. So it's a family that's been in the neighborhood for a long time.
Right.
It's almost like they had a fence around it, it would be like their little enclave, compound, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so that's what I know about the history of that one. The house has definitely been deteriorating for a long time. There's currently is a notice on it from the building inspector that it's declared unfit for human habitation. I'm not sure how long that's been there.
June of 18?
Right.
Oh, okay. Does anyone know the origin of the name of the street, Rust Avenue? I always wondered about that. Do you know, Dylan?
But can we let somebody in there?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
very open meeting. Whoever would like to
Yeah, okay.
make a
I'm
comment.
assuming that's why you're here.
Well,
All right.
I live in the house next door at 8 West Avenue. I'm Benjamin Spencer, and I'm just curious to see what happens, and I'm curious to know what
Could
the
you
plans are.
possibly, just because of my,
Yeah, I'm
could you
sorry.
come a little bit closer? Yeah.
I'm out of curiosity, being the neighbor next door, to what happens next, and I'm also intrigued by the process. And I only wish we had done this one first.
I saw you sitting there. I knew what you
Time that wrong.
Few less people involved in this one than the last one, so maybe the next time. Anyhow, I don't really have a whole lot to say, except that I'm glad to see movement on the
Okay.
property.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. So there's no one here to speak in favor of its preservation? Okay. I visited and sort of saw the condemnation note myself. It appeared that there may have been originally a very small sort of worker's house, kind of a small cape that had been added onto with shed roofs and unusual windows and odd porches.
And it's old too. So didn't you say 1840?
Yeah, the building inspector thought.
So from a,
Yeah.
if it were in some communities in this state, it would be something that with a lot of guts you could rehab and it would be an historic house, but it's unfit for human habitation at this point. Unlike the last house, which was fully occupied and in good enough shape for that, this one is not. And I didn't try to go in, but it's pretty rough. And it's open to the weather with the windows
Yeah, even
on the
with-
gable,
yeah.
the gable end are
Because
open
the
to the weather.
tarps have long since, there were tarps in that house for years, and the
But
tarps.
because of our job, let's take this, before we condemn it because it's condemned. Is there any reason to think of preservation?
Well, I looked at the criteria that Sarah just described. It's not in the National Register, and it's not been found eligible by the Park Service for that listing. I do believe that the building was associated with one or more historic persons or events in relationship to the city. And I think also because of the time, the date of the building, I think it represents again, like a vernacular style that was probably prevalent in that part of the city back in the mid 19th century. So I guess I feel split
Pre-Civil
about
War,
it. Yeah, because it means to and it doesn't mean to.
Is there, who's applied for the demo? The owner?
And is it still for sale? Because there's still a for sale sign on it.
It's under deposit.
Is it? Okay.
It's
So-
under deposit.
Yeah. So does that mean?
Someone's buying
But
it.
has somebody
Right.
actually applied for demolition?
Yeah.
But is that the
I
same owner?
You don't know.
How can you do it if you don't know?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna, maybe the realtor applied for the demolition permit.
It's actually, it's the same, the prospective buyer is the same builder who was proposing to demo the house before.
Oh, really?
But doesn't somebody have to own it in order? No, so, so you can file a.
Can you?
You can apply as an authorized agent. So if they're under contract with the current owner, then that would be something that we could do.
Is he the guy who's gonna buy it, like he did the Florence thing?
Yes, so it says.
The one on,
What street is that?
it's the one.
Oh,
right here.
Garfield.
Garfield,
Yeah.
yeah, Garfield Place, I think. Yeah.
Which house?
We did.
This is the one that you weren't here for. It was on Garfield Place in Florence.
Got it.
But the determination is still limited to those four criteria. The determination is limited at this point to those four criteria, as to whether the building is significant.
And that area is zoned for what, single family home?
Primarily, there could be some multifamily allowed there if the lot were big enough. I don't know if they're big enough.
It looks like a really
It's a pretty
small
small
lot,
lot.
yeah.
It was a small,
Very small lot.
Yeah.
But I do agree with Martha that, again, because a lot of people in that area worked at the hospital and also the upholstery shop, that it is, it is,
There's
we
a
thought it was
story.
significant.
Yeah, well, let's
Yeah.
circle up again because
Okay.
of the time.
Yes.
And let's just focus on the house itself. It's quite an interesting question because it's really decrepit.
Right.
It's also pretty old. You can still see what the original house was, and because all of the other appurtenances have been added on, both the outbound side of the house and the back. But originally there was probably a small single peak gable roof, just a little house on the side of the road.
Yeah.
So do we preferably preserve it and then?
Well, significant, just only significant.
I'm sorry, do we declare it?
Significant.
Do we declare it significant? Because technically it is an 1840s house.
Right.
In Northampton.
Right.
Or do we not? Because it's in such a decrepit condition.
Shall I make a motion?
I would be delighted if you did, but can you hang on? Sarah, is there any regulatory guidance on?
So you have to look at those four
The
criteria.
four criteria that I
Yes.
mentioned, yeah.
Okay.
At this point.
And
And
you
then,
said,
and then if it's determined significant, then the commission could discuss anything about the history of the house.
Right, like we just did before.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I move that we vote to determine or to designate the property at 47 Chapel Street as significance based on 2 of the 4 criteria, that the building is associated with persons that are important in the history of the city, and that it's architecturally representative of an early time period in that part of the city.
It's Pat.
is there a second one?
I would say.
Second, okay, discussion. And you,
How is it, I can't remember how it's situated. Is
it
it
faces the road, faces
It faces
66.
the road, but are there other homes right next to it, or? Well,
It
my
used to be-
recollection is that it was just kind of set by itself.
Well,
It-
And then
well,
Is
there
it
are
set
2
by itself?
driveways, there are 2 small driveways, and then there's Benjamin Spencer's
Well,
house.
actually, the
And on the
the
other
driveway
side-
belongs to the house behind.
The-
And then this house has a
Well-
driveway that actually comes off of 66.
Right, so that, can I speak?
So that's
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the far side of Rust Avenue, must be. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are 2 driveways on that property,
Yeah.
one that comes off of Route 66,
Yeah.
and another one that's adjacent to my driveway that was covered with snow, maybe when you were
Yeah, you may not have
visiting.
realized
So
that.
you wouldn't know necessarily that that was a driveway.
Okay.
But,
They're 2 small driveways.
that's right.
So the site itself is relatively unimproved from the time of its construction. I mean, there's no paved driveway. It's right beside the highway. It always, it was always a humble little workman's house. But there it is, and people have added stuff to it, and it remains an old vernacular house of its type. So when it gets to the question of whether we want to put demo delay on it, then we can take into account questions of decrepitude, I think. But at the moment, what we're doing is intellectually saying,
Is it is it worth having that?
is it historic?
discussion?
Yeah,
And I think
it is
that-
historic, and later we can decide what should be done with it. So the vote is on the table. It's been seconded. We've had discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Okay, great.
And there's a public
So
hearing.
it may, we may
We
not,
don't usually stay this late. It's like a long night.
the issue is, we may not demo delay it, possibly, because of its decrepitude, but, and because some things simply are too far gone. But we want to hear from somebody about that, and we want to get more information on it. It is an old house, it's worth looking at, and that's what we've just done, is to say we're gonna look at it.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah. The fact that it's condemned at the moment, no, I mean, seriously, you can condemn a house because the toilets don't flush.
oh yeah, no,
And it's a 1975 house. So, just the condemnation alone is not to say that the house can't be preserved.
Yeah.
Just for our information, but
Yeah.
when was it last occupied? Obviously in June 2018, I assume it was padlocked.
right, I think that's when
So that's when
they
whoever was,
move out, was when I was condemned, so.
but somebody had been living
To my knowledge,
up there
yeah, it was-
until that point.
it was back occupied.
So we would have a public hearing, and the neighbors would be welcome to, anyone can come to that.
Sure, oh yeah.
So- and it's
With-
always
With the
useful to have-
developer, so I have to say, you piqued my interest when the mention of the person who purchased this is someone who purchased a house in Florence. And see, you've done it again. And so I'm a little concerned because there's, I mean, if I can speak, just if it comes down and something new goes up, I've been sort of telling myself it's gonna be okay because people are building nice houses in Northampton. Having been here this evening, I'm not so convinced that I can tell myself that with the same amount of certainty. So if it does get designated, or at the next meeting, like would the developer be at the next meeting? Would that developer need to be here with drawings? Would that developer, no?
He should be. I mean, the one in Florence, just to give you an example, There was a very large turnout from the neighborhood, very large, and they were very vocal. And I think it really, we listened to that. We took them really seriously, and so.
Well, I won't take up anymore. I'm sure I could talk more.
But sir, can I just ask a question pursuant to this? So obviously somebody applied to demolish the house, but there was no plans submitted for what they wanted to do.
Not in this case, no. Sometimes
So there
there
hasn't
are,
been
depending on where
submitted.
people are in the planning process. Sometimes it's just to get the ball rolling. And I suspect that this person probably knew that they might trip general zoning on to get things going.
Since they've been through it before.
It's possible he could withdraw his offer.
He could.
If he's made his offer contingent on this meeting.
But would the
we
public
don't
hearing
know,
for
right?
that be also May 25th, or would it be into, March, or would it be into April?
It probably, it probably will be March 25th, unless the applicant agrees to an extension.
It's gonna be a long night.
That won't be here for that. That one I'm really, that one I'm really,
And there will be a.
that one I'm really interested in being.
You can watch it on TV.
I know, I'm not gonna be here for March 25th.
Oh, God.
That one could be delayed.
Okay, that's it on that building.
Thanks.
And because of the hour, is
No,
there?
we can't.
We have to do Cooley Dickinson.
Yes.
There's what?
We'll be fast. We'll be quick.
This sounds really intriguing. I can't wait to hear about it.
Can we maybe speak now, or?
I'm
Yes.
thinking-
Are you gonna be there to speak
I
now?
literally can't even see you,
No,
much less hear
we'll
you.
stand right. I'm gonna pass it, we'll try to be quick, since you've been here a long time. So I'll just pass these out. So anyway, just to.
Stretching my legs. Just stretching my
And
legs.
I'm certainly not meant to overlook you, I apologize.
That's okay, no problem.
I'm stretching my legs.
Sarah, thanks.
So thank you for hearing from us. Just to give you some background, I'm Joanne Fink. In my real world, I'm in insurance, making Paris Insurance, but I volunteer. I'm president of Friends of Cooley Dickinson. And
Thank
Lynn
you.
Parsons is also, she's the vice president of our fundraising. So just a quick background about what Friends of Cooley Dickinson does is we're a dedicated group of volunteers. We support patient services, we advocate for the hospital, we raise funds, and we do a lot of money for that. What we've done is over the past, we've been around since 1904, so there's history, which I know you like. And what we have done in the past is raise almost $2.8 million over the course of time with things. And our last project we're now doing is a very big thing with our new birthing center that's going to be, it's 20 years old and needs an uplift. So we manage the coffee shop, the gift shop through volunteers. We do art exhibits and we do special events, the Trees of Love. And one of the events that we would like to do is what we're proposing. And what I'm going to do is, we'd like to work with a venture with the Northampton Historical Commission because we understand, I know sometimes you get confused with being the Northampton Historical Society.
Yeah.
So, and just as much as Friends of Cooley Dickinson is kind of slightly unknown, so we thought we could pair off each other. And Lynn has come up with a wonderful event that we thought would be nice for both of us in terms of exposure and, in one sense, hopefully raise some money for the hospital because that's really our goal. We are a nonprofit, and so I will let Lynn talk about what we do.
Okay. Just a little background for me. My family moved here in '72 with my husband, Dr. John Parsons, who's practiced surgery for 30 years and retired in 2003. And lo and behold, my son moved back. He's also a doctor, Dr. Timothy Parsons, and he's now also practicing family medicine with Northampton Family Medicine under the auspices of Cooley Dickinson. So we are really avid supporters of trying to make things better for both patients and Cooley Dickinson alike. In 2007, our home at 41 Lyman Road won an Historic Preservation Award. And we were very honored to be chosen, and it gave me the idea for this proposal
which I'll just go over with you quickly. And I know you turned the page, David, and you saw your house down there. This does not mean it has to be on the I went through very carefully, and I wasn't going to leave your house off. If you notice, Craig's is also on there. And he has a beautiful video of his, but I'll get to that in a second. So what we're proposing, we're in the early stages here, but we're proposing a Historic Preservation Award-winning home tour in Northampton. We're looking at late June, probably Saturday, June 29th for the event, and we hope to include 6 to 7 homes for people to view from about noon to 4. And we were discussed a ticket price of $25. We hope to include winning homes from 2000 to the present, using examples from several years during that span. We're proposing a joint venture with the Northampton Historical Commission as co-sponsor, which would give the public an idea of what the commission does to encourage, in your words, the preservation, promotion, and development of the city's historical buildings. I think many are unaware of what you do for the city, and as Joanne mentioned, also confuse you with the Northampton Historical Society. I've attached, I'm going to skip what the flyers might read because you can see that later. I've attached a list of possible homes, and we would certainly value your input in selecting the home to include. We'd like to keep the tour to private homes and not focus on office buildings or public facilities. If you turn the page, you'll note that there are quite a few years missing. I put down homes by years where I have found homes, but if you notice 2009, 2010, 2012, and 2014 to 17, there are no listings on the internet on your site. Now, I don't know if they
Well, there were a number of years, well, but that we didn't do it, so that may be part of it. But it also may be that we didn't have slides or something, but I could check, because I kind of have a file of that at home.
Super.
So I could check
Is
on
one
whether
of you
there are others
Barbara?
available. I'm Barbara.
Okay, because you're down at the bottom of the award list, and I thought that's what I need to speak to. So I'm Lynn, and now that I've seen you, I might be talking to you.
So I can double check.
Yeah.
There aren't more.
The situation is, I like the before and after, which I know you did for the 2018 presentation. You had a before and after board, which I'd like to have in the homes if I can get it. I don't know if Rodney, is it Kunis? He used to be your photographer. I don't know if he still does work for you. But I do have access to a photographer if we really needed to take some photos. So what I'm interested in, number one, is we would actually be delighted to be co-sponsor with you. I don't see a large commitment of time from the commission as our volunteers expect to do the lion's shares of the work. I would be visiting each home that was selected, meeting with the family. They may say we don't care to have our home gone through. Telling them they could tie off some rooms if they didn't want those used, but some people may just not feel that they want, to have people going through their home. I would also be asking if they would like someone there the day of the event, just to check tickets or to do whatever. We'd have flyers about the commission in the homes, and we'd probably print up a little about friends and the history of the house. Those volunteers could be supplied mostly from our end, unless someone wanted to from the Historical Society go to a certain house that they, like if Craig decided that his house was one he wanted, so forth. We thought we would seek other sponsors, mostly the architects, builders, and such who did the actual work on restoring the homes. John Kuhn was just unbelievable in doing our home. And you can just pass this around and look at it, but and the builder Tiagno was wonderful. And if you look at Gail Yakuzo's house, which is 88, is down here also. Gail and Dan's house. Tiagno was the builder there, so we would contact them and see would you be interested in sponsoring us. So this is the before and after of our house. So this was the first, and this was what we did. But I thought we were looking to get publicity for you, for both of us, in the local papers. And I just thought it was a nice tie-in.
for the city.
It's lovely.
a
First off,
great
a
idea.
huge
Yeah.
thank you to both of you for the outstanding work you're doing on behalf
This is a great
of such a great cause. I mean, the Cooley Dickinson is a rare thing these days, a small community hospital,
It is.
and they're a dying breed, but not Cooley Dickinson.
But you
And-
know, we've made such huge steps with the cancer center. The breast center is beautiful, brand new.
It's great.
So bless you both
And,
for what you're doing.
so, thank you. But we would absolutely be delighted to have you. We'd be honored. I really would try to keep any kind of time, as I've seen what you do, down to a minimum.
I think it's a great idea, and I can't speak for the commission, but we probably would give you our wholehearted support for this, because it's a great cause. Are you also seeking the Historic Northampton's support too?
No, they're shut until May, as you probably know. And I kind of wanted to highlight you because you've done all the awards, and these houses are
Great.
awarded
Yeah, I think
houses.
it's a great partnership.
I think it's a really great idea too, but as you know from getting an award, I mean, I just, maybe I'll play the devil's advocate, seeing, is this a problem? We look at the exterior of houses.
Right.
We don't, you could take an older house, a really old house, and just completely demolish everything inside, have a totally open floor plan. But we might prove or say, or give you an award because, wow, the exterior looks great and you restored it. And I'm just worried, I mean, to me, it worries me if somebody tours the inside of the house and they say they gave this house an award, somebody who says, oh, they ruined the interior, where's all the molding, this is 19th century.
Well, that actually wasn't.
So I just worry a little bit about that.
That's a very good point. Our house, that wasn't necessarily the case. We were gone through, we gutted it, but we did, we were so, John Kuhn was so careful, the builders so when I put these houses down, I've looked at the slides that you provide, so that they're interior. I've looked, there's some of them.
No, but again, we may have a slide of the interior, but our award is really solely based on exterior work.
That's the criteria.
It really is only an exterior work.
Okay, because there's.
So it's just,
So
it's a
let's
possible.
move forward. I think.
It's okay, but I think it's a great idea.
Could I make I don't want to stop talking because
I think it's a great idea.
you know me, but could we vote to support this and then we'll have some further discussion? Okay, I'll make the motion that we support being in a joint venture with the Friends of Cooley Dickinson Hospital to support their efforts in formulating this wonderful house tour of historic homes, particularly homes that have been recognized by the commission for their exterior work. So all those, is there a second for my motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you. And so is there discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
So thank you
So
all.
we're going to do it.
And I'm going to be visiting when we finally get, Barbara, I'm going to make an appointment with you and I'll call you tomorrow or whatever, get in touch with you. So I can come in and see what we might have left available.
Yeah.
But I'm going to visit each of these homes. For instance, 302 Elm that won this year, Jen Adams and Jeff Sternal.
I think they're my neighbors. I think they'll
They
be
did a
really.
beautiful job.
They did, and they
you
love
know,
having people in the house.
And I would really, even though you just did the outside of the house, I think the house is gorgeous, and I'd love to have different styles and different, different times of year. And I also know that you'll probably be announcing winners. We're talking June 29th. You come out, I think, late April with 2019 winners.
We'll see.
I don't know.
Okay,
Next
well,
year.
it doesn't
We
really
have
matter.
sometimes waited several
We'll
years.
get
in
6 or
between.
7, so
Waited
it doesn't really matter, but,
I think, without talking to my wife, I think I'm volunteering for it next year. I would love to do it this year, but I'm being taken to Ukraine to visit her family now.
No problem, no problem. I could not put you down there, David, because you won your award.
It's like Kansas, but without the excitement.
Yeah, okay, we won't bother you, but maybe Craig would agree, because his house has such history and story to it.
Yeah.
But we'll see, there's a lot of,
idea, it's great.
you know.
I love it, so.
Well, keep all that. Maybe I should take a newspaper article where I wrote that. And thank you so much for your time. You've had a really busy night. I appreciate you fitting us in.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. So Barbara, I'll call you.
Yeah, or I can give you my email too if
Yeah.
do you have mine? I can just write down my. You can go on while I'm doing it. Okay. I can listen.
How are you? How are you? A long time no see.
Okay, is there anything else? on our agenda?
I just have one other thing. The Community Preservation Committee is going to be hearing public comment on our second round of applications for this fiscal year, and I'm thinking it's next Wednesday, right? Yeah, I have my calendar with me. We need someone to come from the commission to speak on behalf of the Abolition and Reform National Register District to just support, from the commission. I'm not comfortable doing that as a CPC member. Is anyone available Wednesday night, next Wednesday night? Next Wednesday. It's the 20th? Would you be able to do that? Okay. He presented last week. Did a fantastic
But you
job.
can send me the application.
Yep, we can do that.
Yeah, I can do, I'm a little trepidation because I felt
The
I
last
wasn't
time.
prepared enough for last.
I mean, this is really simple, just because I think it's got a lot of really positive support from the committee.
And this isn't presenting the full application to the
No, I
committee like you
understand.
did, Barbara.
Yeah.
This is just getting
It's
up and
just
saying, like,
supporting.
hey, we
On behalf of the
support
historical.
this. All right,
But I
now-
definitely want to read it.
Okay, yeah, can you send it to Barbara?
Yes, you can do that.
Okay, so that's the CPC meeting. And what time is the meeting?
7.
7 p.m. I'm
We
pretty
only
sure-
have,
I'll let you know right away if I can't, but I know I'm busy, I mean, it's not in 2 days, but not this Wednesday, but you know what? I'm actually supposed to be away that day, that whole week. I'm not in town.
Next week?
I could, well, the 19th through the 22nd or something, but I could, let me figure out whether I could get home
Okay.
that night.
All right.
I mean, I'm doing something during the day, I don't have to, I'm staying over in Shelburne, but I could conceivably get back sooner.
Okay, well, just let us know.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are only 3 applicants, right?
Yeah.
Is Wayne, yeah, so there are only, I think, 5 applications or something, and 3 of them are Wayne's.
And you definitely can't do it?
I'm good.
And you
I'm
can't do it?
scheduled to work and I already asked for that.
That's okay,
night
I'll
off. I feel horrible because I did write a letter for this. application.
Yeah, there's been a lot of support, I'm sure that
I'll
Historic
just
Northampton will come.
figure out a way to get home.
If you can't,
Barbara,
will
where do you
somebody
need to
let
go?
me know
I'll
and
let you know
I'll
what?
double.
Where do you need to go after the meeting?
Well, I'm doing a class in Shelburne, and I'm staying there Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and I was coming home Thursday night and going back on Friday, but, so in theory, I'm supposed to be back in Shelburne after the meeting.
I live in Charlemont,
Yeah,
so if you want to hang out, I can probably do that.
yeah, okay. Well, I still have to figure out a way to get back to
Oh,
work
okay.
after that day, but that's okay.
That I can-
Joe will probably pick me up, I'll work on it, and I'll let you know right away, because I should know.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna call a meeting.
Thank you.
I will close the meeting